what a caring community we have. Isn't that nice? Any other announcements? Marilyn.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Parr with the Oakmont Village Library, and I need your help. Starting Wednesday, this Wednesday, the CAC will be closed for the rest of this week and all of next week for a recarpeting project. So for the library, that means we need to move out 20,000 plus items. And we're going to be doing some of that through human book brigades. And that's where I need you. I have 9 brigades over 4 different days. The shift is 2.5 hours with a break in between. And I will have chairs for people who want to just pass the book along while you're sitting. And for the rest of you able-bodied who want to and can stand, we'll do a combination of sitting and standing. So it'll be a great community experience for you. I've got flyers in the back. I'll be at the back table after the program, and you can sign up for one shift or all 9. Thank you.
So are people going to carry the books themselves or with wheelies or what?
One book at a time, just like a bucket brigade. It works.
20,000 books, one book at a time. Okay, and movies. Jeff, what's the movie this afternoon? And here he comes. How many of you go to the movies? Stay and go to the movies. Oh, good.
Movie today will be Return to Me. It's a few years old. We're doing old time favorites during December. And this is about a man, his wife's heart is transplanted into another woman. He falls in love with that woman. And it's kind of a variation on the love triangle basic plot.
I remember that one. Remember, it's really a tearjerker and a chick flick. Okay, so let me see. Have I gone through the list? And Virginia said, I'm going to write big for you, but the trouble is I can't read her handwriting. Okay, so again, I want to remind you, this is our last session of this year. We'll be back on January 8th with a speaker from the Buck Institute. And now we're going to have a wonderful presentation. Do you remember way back when San Francisco was happening, with the hippies and Haidt-Ashbury and Carol Doda? So that's where Benita is going to take us today. She's going to take us back in history. And she is the wife of Peter Mattioli, who ran several of these businesses, right? That's how I should say it, between 1958 and 1974. And she also has a book about this, which you can buy at the back table afterwards, and she'll even sign it. And they are also making a documentary about this. So cool. Now, I do have to make an announcement here that this is not a PG presentation. She has 1 or 2 slides of boobies. She will announce that. But if anyone here is going to be highly offended, you have been warned. And I really liked Jim Morrison's answer when I told him that. He said, really? That's why I came. Anyway, so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Benita. We test out all of these things.
Yeah.
We put our own batteries in. And this is acting up, so I'm gonna have to take the batteries out and put them back in, so hang on.
I can start with the microphone. Testing. While Judy's doing that, we'll go ahead and get started because, wow, I'm so, so excited to see all of you here today. First, I want to say good morning to Oakmont Symposium and others. I see some of my flight attendant friends here, and thank you for coming. And I see some of our ranching friends when we had our ranch over on Petaluma Hill Road, and a whole bunch of my friends from the newcomers group, and even the lady who sold me my house here in Oakmont. She's here. Thank you for coming, to all of you. I'm so glad you are here to celebrate Pete's remarkable life. I know that a lot of people think this is the Carol Doda story I'm going to tell today, and it's not. It's actually, I wrote the book, it's a memoir of Pete's life, his entire life. And so sandwiched in between all the fun that he had and the adventures he went on is Carol Doda's story. So we will kind of focus on before the Condor and after the Condor. So somebody came up here before to say hello to me, and they said, gee, I invited my friend and I told her that she was going to come to, would she like to come to a presentation of the Condor? And her friend says, oh, yes. Well, she thought it was the condor bird that was going to be presented today. And she had to explain to her, no, that's not it. Not the one. So glad to see both of them here today. And thank you again for coming in the rain. And also a very special welcome to who I just now saw in the room, Jonathan Parker and Marlo McKenzie from Jonathan Parker Films. They are producing a documentary on the life of Carol Doda. That will be her story, and it'll be released very soon. Thank you for coming, Jonathan and Marlo. And stick around in case somebody has some questions for you today. I would remind you that my book is about, let's see, Pete owned the Condor for 16 years, and he was a major player in the entertainment world. What's most remarkable about his life is after he was such a mover and shaker and in the jump and jiving scene of North Beach, he sold in 1974, moved to Sonoma County, bought a property of 21 acres over on Petaluma Hill Road, and built a horse ranch. He was able to transform his life completely and become one of the most successful ranch owners and breeders of quarter horses in California.
We went through this beforehand. So we'll do it again, and then she has to do a quick, can you hear us?
Testing. Okay. I'm not used to this, but I will get used to it. Thank you. So before we begin, I'd like to mention, as has already been mentioned by Judy, that a couple of the photos of my slideshow could be considered a little naughty or risque, or however you want to describe it. But I would hope that you would consider them in the historical sense. Okay. All right, it's time. We'll leave that slide up for a while. Okay, let's have some fun. I'm going to roll us back into San Francisco's of the 60s, actually before that, and take you on a wild ride through North Beach. We were all young and innocent. Maybe you were dating or maybe you were married, but if you were from the Bay Area or just visiting,
you had definitely heard about all the goings on in San Francisco. You might have even gone to the Condor yourself with friends, or you might have gone as a married couple and enjoyed the. Okay. Yes, thank you. After enjoying dinner at one of the fine North Beach restaurants, that were many, and you might have popped into the Condor for after dinner cocktail. This was after the beatnik era and before the summer of love, the early 1960s. The topless revolution blew into San Francisco and changed pretty much everything. So hands up, how many of you have ever been to the Condor nightclub? You can put your hands up because your mom's not here. Yeah. And I'm so glad to see that. Well, you probably, did you use a fake ID to get in? One, two, a few. Yay, good. Well, you got in. And let's see, you probably didn't like paying the steep cover charge because there was one, but you always liked the 2-drink minimum, right? Right. He grew up in San Francisco's North Beach and was the co-owner of the Condor nightclub for 16 years, from 58 to 74. I met Pete on Waikiki Beach in 1970 when I was on vacation, so I was not around for the beginning of the Topless era, 1970. So Pete showed me a scrapbook that he kept one day, and it contained numerous newspaper clippings that he had cut out and saved. Well, I was fascinated. What a story they told. About 10 years ago, I began writing some stories that Pete had shared with me, our families, and his hundreds of friends. He had long since moved from the San Francisco nightclub scene and transitioned himself into Sonoma County's horse industry, but his memory was still sharp of those days, and I used a lot of his memory to write the book. I did several interviews with many of the North Beach players, and I did extensive research as well. Since I was in high school when most of the events described in the book happened, I had to rely on newspaper accounts that were saved, and some of them were buried deeply in the vaults of the San Francisco Library. So I made several trips to that library, as well as the Bancroft Library in Berkeley, for images and information and articles, and to obtain the rights to publish the information from that time. I knew I had to get every detail right. I was picky. And I knew that I was probably the only one who could write this story, because a lot of the people of the North Beach scene and journalists had passed. And so I didn't know who else. So I just went out and interviewed who I could. The journalists at that time, the San Francisco Chronicle Examiner and the News Call Bulletin, were excellent. And sometimes I quoted their articles directly for the book, since they provided details that I could never have known. There are other books that have been written about the Topless era in San Francisco, most of them picture books, of course. But I was interested in the relationships between the players of North Beach, the owners, the customers, the entertainers, and the celebrities who frequented the clubs. That was the real story to me. So why is my book titled 3 Nights at the Condor? I have highlighted 3 things most people think about when they name the Condor nightclub is mentioned. Night 1, everybody remembers the night that Carol first danced on top of the piano wearing her newly designed topless swimsuit. Night 1. Night 2, the night Carol, Pete, and his partner Gino Del Preti were arrested and booked at San Francisco Police Headquarters. It was a citywide crackdown and on topless dancing, and it involved 12 clubs in all. Night 3, the night that Jimmy Ferrazzo was found dead on top of the piano, crushed as he and his female companion were engaged in romantic antics on the piano as it rose to the ceiling. More on that later. First slide, please. Okay. Born in Peckville, Pennsylvania, Pete moved with his family to San Francisco's North Beach when he was about 11 years old. No, this is not a picture of the Fonz. It's actually Pete at age 16. Next slide. Here he is cavorting with his buddies down at Aquatic Park. They had groups of men that were very, popular, and so you always had this group and clubs. The next one. That's Pete on the left, by the way. Here's Pete front and center. This is some of his high school buddies from Galileo High School. Next one. What's that? Okay. Okay, thanks. He served 4 years in the Navy, and during that time, his father moved his family to Selma, California, and bought a vineyard. Pete joined them after his discharge and tried working in the vineyard, but he missed his friends and the city life of San Francisco. He returned to San Francisco and worked as a bartender in Trader Vic's and the Iron Horse, which maybe some of you have been there too. This photo is of the original Condor Club located on the corner of Columbus and Broadway. You can see it's a tiny neighborhood bar. It was small. And the photo was taken sometime in 1958 when Pete assumed half of the debt owed on the club to become a partner with his longtime friend, Gino Del Preti. Next slide. This is the beautiful Condor bar. It's still in there. It's still beautiful. It's been there for probably over 100 years. It was brought around Cape Horn in the early 1900s. So just having a drink there is an amazing experience to look at that bar. Next slide. So before Carol, they were a very successful club, and they did lots of things to promote the little bar. And this is an invitation to their second anniversary party in 1960. They served lunches and hired small musical groups, but didn't have space to hire any larger entertainment. And the groups just kind of played in the corner over by the cigarette machine, right? Yeah. Sly Stone played there. But anyway, next slide. In 1961, they had a chance to take over the business space just north of the Condor. That was an Italian import porcelain shop. They signed the lease and expanded the club, adding a stage and placing a white baby grand piano on it. This is a photo of Pete and Gino opening the doors of the newly remodeled Condor and inviting guests in. The remodeling chapter in the book is hilarious because neither Pete or Gino had any experience in construction, and they tried to do it themselves. And they nearly brought the hotel above them down, crashing down, because they had sliced into two what do you call it, supporting beams, and it started cracking the hotel, and they went, ooh, so they had to call the city and have them come with some lifts to lift it back up again, and then put new support beams there. These guys, they do it yourself, you know. So they hired, when they remodeled, they hired Bobby Freeman. Do you want to dance under the moonlight, right? And Come On and Swim, he did that. Joe Ryder was one of the performers, Vicky Fraser, Sam the Man, and the Flintstones, and Sylvester Sly Stone, and many other groups. Next slide. Pretty dapper guys, huh? They hired a 4-piece band to accompany some of the singers who entertained there. Later, George Hamilton and Teddy Brown brought their Motown sounds to the Condor, and packed the club with their soul sounds and the dance moves. Together with the backup band, they formed the sensational group George and Teddy and the Condors. That was a big part of their success. Next slide. Here they are with George Burns and Gracie Allen. That's George here, the George and Teddy, and there's Teddy over there. And the guy up on the right-hand side is Jerry Martini, who went on to play with Sly and the Family Stone, and he's actually in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now for playing sax on several of Sly Stone's recordings. So, but he started in the Condor. Next slide. Italian club owner Oliviero invited George and Teddy and the Condors to perform in Italy. Pete accompanied them, and the Beatles were just happened to be in Rome playing somewhere, and they heard about George and Teddy being at Oliviero's, and they wanted to catch the new sounds coming from Motown, and George and Teddy had it. So they came to visit them and caught the show and met them backstage. So there's George Harrison, Paul McCartney, you can see Ringo. Yeah, and George and Teddy. This is Jerry Martini down here again on the bottom. Next slide. Carol Doda was hired as a cocktail waitress in 1963. She was beautiful, sexy, blonde, with a perfect figure and lovely legs. Her breasts at the time were quite normal for her thin figure. Nothing extraordinary. She was good at her cocktail job, friendly, flirty, and well-liked by all the other staff and the customers. The waitress's outfits consisted of a white or black leotard and black pantyhose or tights. Billy Dare, a popular gay entertainer, played piano on Sunday nights, and Carol Doda would jam with him a bit. One night, Billy suggested she jump up on the piano and dance the twist. Soon, she was tagged Twisting Carol, or the girl on the piano. While watching Carol dance on the piano one night, Davy Rosenberg, a Condor PR man, suddenly exclaimed, "Hey, what if we could make that piano go up and down with Carol on it?" Next slide. Well, Pete was given that job of that crazy idea, a reality, and after several attempts, which are detailed in the book, he finally commissioned an elevator company for the task. When the piano rose, the dancer could exit through a hole in the ceiling and down a tunnel into the dressing room. The twist and the swim dances were popular, so Carol traded her cocktail outfit in and danced in a real swimsuit. That's George and Teddy on the side. So they were still playing there when Carol started dancing, way before Topless. But it's coming. With George and Teddy and Carol Doda as entertainers, the piano went up and down. The Condor became the place to be, the most popular club in San Francisco. The town's wealthy residents, politicians, other entertainers, and celebrities jostled in lines waiting to enter the club. Next slide, please. That's just the scene almost every night at the Condor before Carol went topless. So he had a real jump and jiving place. Presenting George and Teddy, Carol on the piano. That was it. No topless. But look at the people. Well dressed, I might say, too. So next slide. Davy Rosenberg became the self-proclaimed public relations man for the entire Broadway strip, booking entertainment and handling the advertising. He had a huge crush on Carol Doda, and even though it was a platonic friendship, he protected her and always looked after her best interest. Sometimes he'd walk her home to her apartment. Next slide. There's Davy Rosenberg with Gino, Pete, and Tony Canastrasi. He was a part owner and a bartender at the Condor as well. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of Pete relaxing inside the club. Quite a debonair, dashing looking guy. No wonder I fell for him. What can I say? Next slide. Rudy Gernreich, an Austrian-born American, his fashion designer, introduced the topless swimsuit to the world in 1964. The San Francisco Chronicle placed its arrival on the front page of the newspaper, not just above the fold, it was above the masthead. That's quite a deal. Davey, next slide. Davy Rosenberg thundered into the condo with a copy of the paper and showed it to Pete and Gino. Look at this. Let's put Carol on this on the piano to dance. And Pete says, what? You crazy? You can't do that. You want to close us down? So Gino thought it was a great idea, but also figured they could never get away with it. Davy rushed out and purchased the suit and brought it back to the Condor. Well, not much to it, Gino said. Pete says, well, we better give Captain Barker a call and see what he thinks. Chief of Police. While speaking with Pete, San Francisco Police Captain Barker explains, well, we'll just have to come and take a look. Yeah, I bet you want to take a look. Was Pete's answer. Carol first danced in the topless suit on June 19th, 1964. Lines formed outside the club and down the street since Davy Rosenberg had alerted every newspaper, radio, and TV station about what was to happen. The news spread like wildfire. Other go-go clubs decided to join the topless revolution, and soon there were as many as 15 nightclubs with some sort of topless entertainment. Next slide. That picture is actually of a little girl, and when she grew up, she sold the topless swimsuit in Nacio's boutique. So there's pictures of her, and there's another story behind that where that was her, and she gave that picture to the Chronicle and says, hey, we've been doing this since I was a kid, you know? Wow. Anyway, next slide, please. Bearsuit outcry. There's more publicity. That was it. All over the papers. Next slide, please. There were about equal numbers of people who were either for or against topless entertainment, with heated discussions ensuing at the police department, the city hall, and in the other clubs. Meanwhile, Carol's breasts were becoming quite the topic of discussion. They seemed to be growing larger with each passing day. Next slide, please. Pete became quite curious at this development and decided it was time to find out what was going on. He confronted Carol in her dressing room where he found her placing hot compresses on her breasts. What are you doing? Pete asked. She admitted that she was undergoing the silicone injections. You're crazy, was Pete's answer. You don't know what that's doing to your body. Carol replied, listen, Pete, it's my body, and I'm going to do whatever I want with it. In the book, I discuss the silicone injections being given to women during the 1960s before the invention of different types of breast implants became more common and were definitely much safer. Next slide, please. Now I can leave this one up as long as you want, guys. So this is a poster. It's the most famous picture of Carol, I think, looking and admiring her body in the mirror. So I have that poster at home, and I think Jonathan uses it in his documentary as well. Wonders of silicone injections. Next slide. Herb Kane, on the right here, was a regular at the Condor Club and often wrote about Carol in his column. TV news anchor Walter Cronkite used to call Pete when he was in town and requested a certain table at the Condor. It was a little bit offside, so he could have some privacy. So next slide. There's one of Herb Kane's column. He was always talking about, oh, this is funny. Carol plans to deduct the cost of her silicone injections, $1,500 as a business expense. Or is it capital gain? Herb was pretty funny. I got to look at a lot of his writings. Next slide, please. Well, it was almost a year after Carol first danced topless that the police department, it was decided that it was time to clean up this sort of behavior. On April 23rd, 1965, the San Francisco Police Department raided 12 establishments featuring topless entertainment, arresting the club owners, managers, and entertainers. Carol was arrested and charged with indecent exposure. Pete and Gino, indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and outraging public decency. Those were the charges. Pete and Gino were charged with keeping a disorderly house. Period. That was it. They were taken to jail, booked, and released later that night. They went back to the club and bought everybody in the house a drink and had a big party and celebrated because they loved the publicity. Next slide, please. The clubs and the women were determined to fight back. Of course, the club owners liked hearing the cash register ring, and the women wanted to keep their jobs. It was the 1960s. Women were fighting all kinds of stereotypes, demanding more rights and telling the world that they were going to do whatever they darn well pleased, and nobody was going to tell them what to do. Next slide, please. In the book, I describe the two most important trials of the topless revolution. They took place at San Francisco Hall of Justice with famed attorney Melvin Belli in this picture. And the lady is Yvonne Danger. Melvin Belli represented the off-Broadway across the street from the Condor, and Yvonne Danger was their star and competed with Carol. So it was back and forth. But Pete and the owner of the off-Broadway, all the clubs used to circle around and buy everybody drinks and back and forth. It was a real different time. They weren't jealous. They'd take their little short shot glass and around to all the clubs and just say, just give me a little hit and then move on to the next club, just to keep everybody going and let them know. And they wanted to know what was going on in the other clubs as well. So there was quite a camaraderie there going on. Melvin Belli represented the off-Broadway, and attorneys Harry Wainwright and Ed Fleischel represented the Condor. Now, can you imagine trying to pick a jury of your peers for a topless trial? Well, kind of a hard thing to do, but Mr. Belli employed some very funny tactics while trying to choose jurors for the trial on Broadway. I've written about him in the book. Next slide, please. There's the jury at the Condor trial. And you can see they were all quite conservative looking, but they were there. They were interested in doing their part. The clubs, let's see. The trials were indeed fascinating, and all the dancers and club owners were acquitted. What was interesting about the trials, and I write about this quite a bit, is that they were acquitted by the orders from the judges, not the jurors. Quite surprising. That's what happened. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. They were all acquitted, and that's a real famous photo of Carol Condor with the headlines "Topless acquitted," once again above the masthead. Want to get your attention. It's amazing. I never see that anymore in papers, but they did it then. Court frees the girls. Next slide, please. Next slide. The Broadway boys all sing this song, Doda, Doda. Next slide, please. And that's Pete and Carol when she was, they were doing an advertising stunt for ties in a can. You bought a can, it had a tie in it. So she was pulling the ties out of the can in that image. Next slide, please. Carol continued dancing at the Condor until 1985, but quit several times trying other entertainment possibilities, including acting in live stage performances and the movies, legitimate and porno. But she always came back to the Condor, and the management always hired her back. It seemed the Condor and Carol were forever connected as a successful combination that just could not be denied. Next slide, please. Oh, while Pete owned the Condor, he was invited to several Harrah's golf tournaments. They were pretty big spenders. So Harrah used to send his jet down to pick Pete and the big spenders from North Beach up, his private jet. Here he's playing with Joe DiMaggio, playing golf at the Harrah's golf tournament. Next slide, please. And Joe the Toe, Bertrano. He kicked for the 49ers. He's in that image. And Pete also owned a restaurant called Del Vecchio's, and it was across from the Condor, across the street. I think the Playboy Club's there, or one of those clubs, not the Playboy, it was there. And Rocky Marciano stopped in there for dinner one night. So that's a picture of Pete with Rocky Marciano, and there's another guy there. That's Fred Apostoli. He was, middleweight champ Freddie Apostoli is also in that picture from San Francisco. And Rocky Marciano was promoting a book, his life story, I guess. And he died right after that image was taken. Next slide. I meet Pete. Okay, one little. During Pete's Condor years, he met several celebrities, including Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, George Burns, Clint Eastwood. They all came to the Condor and to see what was going on. I met Pete on Waikiki Beach. I was wearing a tiny 3-triangle bikini, which was, quite risque at the time. I was working as a flight attendant for major airlines and living in New York City. While chatting on the beach bar with Pete and his buddies in San Francisco, I whined about the Hawaiian music that I had just about had enough of, wanted rock and roll. I returned to my suntan spot on the beach, and Pete went inside the Hilton Hotel and purchased a little transistor radio, put it on a rock and roll station, brought it back down to me, and stuck it in the sand right by my ear. I went, oh, now he's got my attention. I actually had been inside the Condor when in 1966 I flew to the Bay Area to attend my cousin's wedding. Even while living in Utah, I was raised in Utah. I had heard all about the wild things happening on the West Coast, and somehow I finagled an acquaintance to take me to the Condor. And at age 19, and with my fake ID, I got in the club, and I saw Carol, but I'm not really sure. I don't know if I saw Peter that night or not. Didn't meet him until actually 4 years later. Next slide, please. I met Gino and Gloria, and that was at the I don't know, one of the other parties. Next slide, please. That was at the Harris Golf Tournament, Mexican night. Next slide, please. Okay, a tragedy occurred at the Condor on November 23rd, 1983, long after Pete had sold the club. Jimmy the Beard Ferozzo, in this image here on the left, was found dead, crushed between the ceiling and a piano after he had risen to the top. A stripper was also on the piano, still alive, when discovered by Art Tanish. I interviewed Art Tanish, the longshoreman and part-time manager of the Condor, and he was the person who found Jimmy and his screaming girlfriend on the piano that fateful morning. There are several different accounts of what happened. Art says that he thought it was an accident. He figured Jimmy's boot had just hit the up switch and accidentally, and was unaware the piano was rising. Others say there must have been a fight or a brawl inside the club, and because broken chairs were thrown about, tables were overturned, and broken glass was everywhere. So certain people think that Jimmy had been involved with some of the Tenderloin gangs and was the target of some retribution. Other accounts detail that they were sharing a romantic moment at the piano on the piano at the time. It was rising, and both parties were too drunk or too drugged up to have realized what was happening. They had been drinking heavily, and cocaine was found on the bar. The young lady was found with Jimmy, returned to her hometown in the Pacific Northwest, and as far as I know, has never told all that she knows about that night. Next slide. This is the paper. It's not a good image, but that's her that was on the Condor with, on the piano with Jimmy, and there's the famous piano. So still kind of up in the air about what happened. As they were alone, we'll probably never know every detail. Next slide, please. So Pete and I dated coast to coast for 2 years, and he'd meet my flights at the gate, whisk me into the city in his little red Mercedes, straight SL, wine and dine me at the most famous North Beach restaurants, where everyone seemed to know him. One day he met me at the central terminal there, the old United Airlines terminal, and this guy looked over and said, "Hey, Pete," and I said, "Who's that?" And he says, Pete says, "Hi, Joe." I said, "Who's that?" He says, "Oh, that's Joe Aliano. He's the mayor." I went, "Oh, okay." Everybody knew him. Now, what did my Mormon family back in Utah think of me dating a man quite a bit older than me, an Italian of all things, and who owned shares in or managed 7 San Francisco Topless nightclubs? Well, they cautioned me about it, but my folks were open-minded, and after they met Pete and got to know him, they liked him too. Besides being a memoir of Pete's life, it's our love story, as we've been together for 52 years. After selling his interest in all the North Beach businesses in 1974, he purchased property on Petaluma Hill Road, south of Santa Rosa, and began building a breeding farm for his cutting horse champion cow bar. He named the ranch Double Bar M Ranch. Next slide, please. He became active in the horse world, serving on the boards of the Pacific Coast Cutting Horse Association and the National Cutting Horse Association. He's one of the founders of the Sonoma County Horse Council, in which we were both very active, receiving the prestigious Equus Awards and honored by the Sonoma County Fair Board, receiving their Excellence in the Horse Industry Award. An award that we also share with Henry Trioni, among others. Through the years, we diversified the ranch, hiring trainers in English and Western disciplines, and becoming one of Sonoma County's largest boarding and training centers. Next slide, please. That's me and Pete, and that's my gelding that I had for 24 years. Name is Star. Next slide, please. Here we are receiving the Excellence in the Horse Industry from the Sonoma County Fair Board. From Bev Palm. Next slide. And there we are at the Sonoma County Horse Council. We both received the Equus Awards for our work with the horse industry here in Sonoma County. Next slide. And there's our ranch with the beautiful rainbow. That's part of it. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to let you know what else Pete was doing during the time that we owned the ranch. In 1976, he was anxious to get back in the nightclub business. So he purchased the Music Box located in the Creekside Medical Plaza. Some of you might have gone there in the days. It's where Rosso's restaurant is now. So we've probably gone there for pizza. It was a rock and roll venue with live music, but also served lunch to the business and medical community. In 1978, we converted it to a disco, the first heterosexual disco in Santa Rosa. I was the DJ there for the next 8 years, spinning records between my flights and helping Pete with the ranch. It was a busy time. And I trained several other DJs, and some of them they're still doing it, even into their 60s. Next slide. Oh, that one was back there. Go back one, please. There's a picture. During the Oakland Raiders had their training camp at the El Ranch show in Santa Rosa Avenue, on Santa Rosa Avenue where the Costco is. And the players were regulars at the Music Box. We became good friends with Kenny Stabler here, Ted Hendricks, John Matusak, Dave Casper, Lester Hayes, and the coaches Tom Flores and Sam Bogosian. Ted purchased a Calbar colt from us, and Tom and Sam partnered in purchasing another colt by Calbar. We remodeled the Music Box interior and created a restaurant called For Pete's Sake. So if you didn't go to the Music Box, maybe you went to For Pete's Sake. We serve lunch and dinner and still offer dancing at night. Next slide. In 2014, the Condor hosted a huge soiree to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Topless at the Condor. Carol Doda did not attend, but the beautiful transvestite Darcy Drollinger played the part of Carol quite convincingly. It was also Pete's birthday. Next slide, please. So he was presented with, oh, that's me and her. Next slide, please. That was a big party. There's a big cake. It was Pete's birthday, so they presented him on stage with a big cake. Of course. It was delicious. Next slide, please. And this is Mark Calcagni. He's the manager there right now of the Condor. One of Pete's buddies, Charlie Ferrugia. But that was quite a night. Next slide, please. Oh, I had to put this picture here because I didn't go to any universities or colleges, but I did my research at UC Berkeley. So I had to get a picture in front of Spalgate. Next slide, please. So the famous sign featuring Carol Doda was taken down in 1991 and replaced with a current Art Deco sign. The top half of the original sign, complete with the blinking boob lights, now hangs in the entrance of the Condor, a reminder of the fabulous history of Topless. Next slide, please. This is the present Condor sign now, and you can see it's not nearly as exciting as the other one was. Next slide, please. Let's see, Carol. Hold on 1 minute. I wanted to dispel a couple of myths about Pete's life. He was a coal miner's son. He wasn't in the mafia, like everybody tries to say. Oh yeah, but you know, he was in the mafia. Going, I pick up the phone, I answer it, and I know he's not in the mafia. He's a coal miner's son from Pennsylvania. And a lot of people think that I was a dancer there. Of course, I wasn't a dancer. United would have fired me in a heartbeat if I had done that. So I didn't. But anyway, this is the famous sign that's tacked out in front, says it all. The Condor, where it all began, birthplace of the world's topless entertainment and bottomless, but that didn't last long. And so, next slide, please. And now we're retired, living in Oakmont and loving it. 3 Nights at the Condor is available on Amazon.com, but I have some copies available today. I'd be happy to sign them if you like. They're $20 each. Make a great Christmas gift. And if you belong to a book club, you might consider mentioning the book at your next meeting. And let's see, I viewed the work in progress copy of the documentary being produced right now by Jonathan Parker Films and Marlo McKenzie. It is fabulous. You're going to love it. You're going to want to see it. It goes back so many years. They were able to obtain all this vintage footage of Carol, of other entertainment, other entertainers, of other bartenders, club owners. And you know, these girls that were topless in those days are in the 70s, and you know, but they were there, they were talking, and they did a wonderful job of saying how fun it was. It was just so much fun. So we got dancers and so much more. I'm eagerly waiting for it to be released, and I'm sure it'll be very successful and bring back a lot of fun memories. Thanks for your attention. And now if you have any questions for me, Pete, or the producers of the documentary who we're so thrilled to see today. It's called Topless. Oh, the next slide, please. Yeah, that's it. Topless at the Condor, the Carol Doda story. And just wait, it's going to be great. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Benita. We will be passing the microphones out. If you just want to ask a question, put your hand up and we'll get the microphone to you. Over here, Judy, in the back.
Hi, what happened to Carol?
Yes. She went on to entertain. She stayed in North Beach, and she opened up a lingerie shop and entertained in clubs that give her the mic, you know, restaurants and where bars. Gino and Carlos was one she used to go to. The Tupelo she used to go to a lot. And she opened up a lingerie shop, and it happened to be that's how Jonathan Parker met her, is because he owns the building that she had her lingerie shop in. I've been wanting to do this documentary for a long time, and it's coming. So it'll be happening. Yes.
So Benita, the trial,
Yes.
so did it turn on, so would the jury have voted against, and it turned on judges ruling on First Amendment rights, or what was the issue with the trial?
Right. It was a mixed jury, but the Judge Friedman and Lazari both agreed that this should be an acquittal. And they just told the jury, in fact, it's in the book, and I copied that right out of the newspaper because the reporter was there. And it says that they just told the jurors, you can go back and do whatever you want, but I'm going to acquit these people. And it was on the First Amendment more than anything. Yeah, interesting. The jurors were, okay.
Questions?
What an interesting story, Benita. You mentioned that the bottomless component did not last very long. Can you explain how long and why it stopped? Were the police involved?
Yes, that was considered a bridge too far. You know, it came up, and at first they taped the genital area, And there was times when, and I wrote about this in the book, during that heat, the girls would ask Pete to make a heart, you know, down there, or a diamond, or they did all kinds of things to get attention. But it just was too risque, and I think it was I can't remember exactly because I wasn't down there and I didn't know about that, but maybe Jonathan knows what happened to Bottomless. I don't know. Did you ever get anyone to tell you why that was?
Hold on.
This is Jonathan Parker from Jonathan Parker Films.
Hi, and this is Marlo McKenzie.
Marlo
next to
McKenzie.
me. After Bottomless, there was a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that you can do it in a theater presentation or in a movie, but not where alcohol is sold. So it became an alcohol beveraging control, got the control over that. And so if you couldn't sell drinks, they just said Bottomless is dead.
Yeah, the ABC, the Alcoholic Beverage Control, was powerful in those days. And that they only got topless because they had to stay on the stage. They couldn't have entertainers walking around topless or serving drinks, huh? So it had to be entertainment that was on the stage. Any other questions? Oh, we got one back there. Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you very much for fascinating historical presentation. I was
That's
wondering
good.
if you could, we could ask Jonathan and Mackenzie when their film is coming out and how it'll be available.
Yes, that's the big question.
I think the question is to you.
So we're actually wrapping up the film. We're wrapping up the film right now. We're doing a lot of finalizing things with the audio and color correction. And then we're going to apply to film festivals. So at this point, we don't yet know when it's going to come out, but sometime next year for sure. And we're really excited about that. And as soon as we do have a screening available, we'll let Benita know. And if you're connected to Benita, so stay connected to Benita. We'll let her know, and she'll let you all know. And hopefully we'll see some of you there at one of the screenings.
Now, yeah, that's another question I've had. Are you still working on the movie series? A movie series?
There you go.
Okay, we'll get back to you on that.
Hi. I had an interesting personal experience at the Condor way back then when my husband and me had to entertain people, usually from the conservative Midwest. And I had gone to the Condor, and I, before that, heard a very interesting small musical group that I'm sure you know of. So I recommend it. So we all go into the Condor, sit down, order a drink, and right away I thought, something's different here. So what happened is the spotlight went to the ceiling, and we all went, what? And down came the piano with Carol Doda on top of the piano. And these people that we brought there were just aghast. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done?
I bet they had the time of their life.
The best time they've ever had. Do we have any other questions?
Jonathan, do you want to answer about the moving forward with the movie series? Maybe something?
Sure.
I know you've been working on that.
Well, we started figuring that we would be pitching this as a TV series, a limited series, and then we started interviewing some of the participants in the scene, and it was obvious that we needed to start filming those interviews because they were such characters. And so at this point, I think if the documentary does well, we'll have an opportunity to pitch it as a series. But we interviewed probably 40, 45 ex-dancers, bartenders, musicians, club owners from who were around at the time, and so it's quite a lot of interesting stories.
they've worked their heart out on this documentary, and it's so good. Marlo has put her life into this for so many, what, 3 or 4 years, and done an excellent job. So congratulations to you too, and we're all looking forward to it. Yes, Sharon.
Hold on, wait. Up your mouth.
You talk about the fact that this changed everything. What do you think is the biggest change that happened in either San Francisco, California, or the country after this? The
I think-
topless revolution.
Yeah, I think it was a big women's rights achievement win, for women to say, wow, look what they're doing over there. Maybe I want to do that. Maybe I can get, have more power over my body and those kinds of things too. So I just think that it enlightened a lot of women. I mean, I've had some criticism saying, oh, how could you done that? They used those women. They were, mean to they weren't. They got highly paid. They thought they were their entertainers. They treated them pretty darn well. So, I mean, from everybody I've talked to, they say that. So I just think that it was an empowerment for women to be able to do that and to win.
Benita, thank you for a great presentation.
You're welcome.
We want to thank all you, our audience that comes to our Sunday symposiums. We can't wait to see you again.